Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, my dear brothers and sisters. I hope you've had a good break. Before we went for the break, I was talking to my guest today, Maqsood Ahmed, who's come all the way from across the Pennines in Manchester about issues around Islamophobia, etc. And we'll come back to that in a little while. But obviously, one of the things that is at the forefront of the minds of the Muslim community at this moment in time is the tragedy that the Muslim people of New Zealand have suffered. 50 people killed on a Jummah while they're praying Friday prayers. 50 or more are injured, some very seriously in the hospitals at the moment. So I ask every one of you, and I'm sure you've done it, I don't have to ask you, to make du'as for those who passed away. May Allah give them the highest place in Jannah and their families sabr, but also those who are injured, that may Allah give them recovery very quickly and give them shifa, and that those families get strength and support from wherever they need that is available to them. And we should do everything we can to help those families as well. And I know there's lots of people who are also fundraising for the victims of New Zealand Christchurch, and inshallah, we'll all help in any way we can. Earlier this week, while this issue has been at the forefront of people across the world, we saw a number of attacks taking place in Britain as well. We saw one in Surrey where somebody was going out in the night, shouting and screaming racist Islamophobic abuse, who's been arrested. We've seen other attacks take place, and the police have confirmed that over the last few days, and they have seen a spike, an increase in Islamophobic attacks. And I asked my colleague, my friend Paul Gianassi, to come and join me here today, because he's the most senior he was police officer, but he's now the senior lead dealing with hate crime on behalf of the government, and also for the National Police Chiefs Council, which used to be ACPO, ACPO. And he is in Brussels. He couldn't join me live here. He has been here before, and I had an opportunity to talk to him. So let me share with you our discussion that I had with Paul earlier this week. So let's play that tape, and you can see what happened and what we discussed about, and what his advice was to the Muslim community from Brussels. I have with me my dear friend and one of the most senior officers responsible for managing hate crime or monitoring hate crime in the country, and that is our dear friend Paul Gianassi, whom you've seen here before. Paul is at this moment away from the studios, so we've done a link with him, and we want to talk about this issue of hate crime and the atrocities that have taken place in Christchurch, etc. Paul, welcome to the program. I hope you had a safe journey to Belgium, where you are at this moment in time.
It was good, thanks.
You managed to get there safe and sound?
Yeah, just eventually.
Eventually, yeah. I know there's been issues around Eurostar today. All day I've been listening to it. You're there at a major conference, I believe, as well.
That's right. Yeah, it's a
well, thank you for taking time out. Obviously, I have the letter that the Mark Hamilton, who is the Assistant Chief Constable for Northern Ireland Police Service. He is also the NPCC lead on hate crime, and you work very, very closely with him, following the atrocious act of terrorism that's taken place in Christchurch in New Zealand, where 50 people have lost their lives, another 50 are injured, some of them very seriously. Obviously, there's quite a bit of anxiety, fear, worry, concern about safety and security of mosques and Muslims in this country. And this letter actually is trying to reassure the community. And in his letter, he talks about, my first thoughts are sympathy for those who were directly affected in the tragedy. I understand that also such attacks cause immense fear in the broader community, even those of us on the opposite side of the world. And he talks about ideologies such as these fuel disgraceful acts and must be challenged at all time. And possibly there might be somebody who might be influenced by these acts in the United Kingdom, and he wants to reassure that the police service in this country, and I know you work very closely with all the police forces, is that the police will do everything they can to make sure that they're on top of the situation, and they've already put sort of more police officers on the ground to try and reassure the community. Paul, obviously I don't have to ask you this. I know that you will condemn this act that has taken place in Christchurch, but we've seen already in this country there's some allegations of attacks that have taken place over the last few days. What's the message you would like to give to our viewers of IQRA TV who may be concerned about what has happened in New Zealand and how that might reflect in the UK?
So I guess there's a number of messages on a number of levels. Clearly, this is a deep personal tragedy for the people involved, but it's also really obvious that communities will feel unsafe. It reminds people of the horrendous bigotry that exists in our society, in our civilization, and we know that there are extremists in every corner of the world. We know that their reach is significantly greater because of global communications, because of the mobilization of people. And we know the people, particularly people who we identify with, becoming harmed. We know that it isn't an individual threat. We know it isn't an individual hostility to somebody we don't get on with. We know this is a threat that exists in society in its various guises. And here we have a tragic example of people who've lost their life as they go about their life innocently, and they've lost their life to bigotry and hostility. So our first message is really about our commitment to try and reduce the harms that these incidents cause. And one of our academic friends talks about a ripple effect, that when you throw a stone in a pond, clearly the biggest damage is where the stone lands, but actually the ripples go long and wide. And the internet and global communications and particularly the nature of this and the use of the internet in this instance just exacerbates that. And we know that the harm is caused by people sitting in their homes in the UK and elsewhere. So the message is one of condemnation, of commitment to try and counter it, both through traditional police enforcement, but also through working with communities to break down the ignorance and the bigotries that exist in a society. And then it's to show leadership, and it's to say that the police and officials from the state have got a responsibility to lead people into those cohesive relationships with people from different communities in a way that reduces the harm of these, and in a way that allows the individuals who have those fundamentalist bigoted ideals to stand out and not be accepted in society in general. So there's those broad leadership issues, and then there's the practicalities of saying, well, what advice do we give to our children? What advice do we give to our friends and neighbours? And how do we go about the daily business in a way that it causes the least damage and doesn't give in to the motivation of these ideologues who would want to cause division, who want to cause fear, and who want ultimately, in some instances, to create a race war, to create a division, to create civil war. And we can't allow that to happen. And the more we work together, the more we work with our societies, with the decent people in every society, and the better chance we stand of avoiding those escalations of violence.
We have seen in the UK, as we have seen in Christchurch as well, that where such atrocities take place, people come together and show solidarity. And certainly in this country, we are blessed that we have seen across the whole of the country people coming into mosques, offering their support, offering flowers, standing shoulder to shoulder on Friday across all cities and towns, saying that not in our name, and we share this grief with you. And I note, as you said in your statement, in your comments, that one of the things that Mark talks about in his letter is one particular concern we have is that a video recorded by the perpetrator has been circulated on the internet. Obviously, this circulation, we need to stop that. And major platforms are working to prevent its circulation, but it is reportedly still being shared across WhatsApp and other social media platforms. We are seeking your support to discourage its circulation and to report anything that is believed to be promoting terrorism or extremism to the appropriate government organizations. Obviously, we have tried to make sure that people, I was sent the video as well, and I, even without seeing it, I deleted it because I don't want to accidentally send it further and promote that man's message even more. And that is what the Prime Minister of New Zealand said as well, that she did not watch it. So I'd urge all my friends and my viewers, if you have this video on your WhatsApp messages service, please, for Allah's sake, delete it, because we don't want to promote that message. So can I ask Paul, in the sense of what are the police doing in terms of practical sense, as you say, to reassure mosques and communities at this moment in time? I mentioned that there are more patrols, there are more presence in the communities as well. But is there anything beyond that the police are doing? I mean, if it happens in New Zealand, where everybody says it's a very peaceful country, and I have some friends. In fact, one of the people who has been tragically killed is a distant relation of mine, a very young man as well. And I have other families living in New Zealand, most of them in Auckland, not in Christchurch. But the fear is that if it happens in New Zealand, could we get a lone wolf in this country? I mean, and would that person be on the radar? Paul, what do you think the police will be doing now, actively pursuing? I know Mark says there's no known threat at this moment in time. What will they be doing to try and reassure the community?
So there's several fronts, and if I could just reiterate the point you just made, Iqbal, I think it's really important. That video that's going around does no good. There is no good to come from that video. I've had access to the file. I haven't watched it. And as somebody who's asked to watch some really horrific video footage, I don't ever want to see another one that I don't have to see. And you can't unsee these things. If you watch it, if you share it, then you exacerbating the harm, and you're feeding into the motivation of the people who want to circulate it. So I think it's a really important message to try and quell these sorts of videos. We saw when we were responding to the Punish a Muslim letters last year, we saw that people were maliciously creating videos of acid attacks and stabbings that were nothing to do with hate crime, and were circulating them as evidence of attacks motivated by Punish a Muslim. And people were circulating them well-intended, but the originator of the video had maliciously created a video to create division between different communities. And by doing something with good intent, we exacerbate the harm caused by those who have got bad intent. So I think that's really important. In terms of what we're doing, there is obviously several elements to policing. There's the investigation and the intelligence side that's been led by counter-terrorist colleagues, and this kind of incident will redouble our efforts to concentrate and to find any links that exist, to look for the motivators. But we know from experience that some people are not connected to groups. They acted out individually, motivated by incidents that are either global or local. So we need to try and understand that to the best we can. And one of the things that we have is what we did last year, and what we've done now is re-establish a goal group to look at community cohesion, bringing all of our partners together from Talmanor, from various parts of government, from the Independent Advisory Group, from all of our partners together to assess the risks, to share our information, and to look at what we can do collaboratively to promote good messaging, to work with communities to find those opportunities, and to stress those stories. The one that Mark referred to in the letter is about when Muslim women stood in solidarity with the victims in Westminster in 2017, and in March they lined across Westminster Bridge. And those sorts of issues of community standing together, I shouldn't need to defend the actions of that person. It should go as taken for granted that everybody every decent person in the world would condemn the actions of a person who does that sort of vile act.
Well, certainly the Prime Minister came.
The more we do to show that solidarity with people of different communities, the more that there is the sense of people being involved in society and welcomed by society. And we can't allow the loudest, the most vociferous voices to be considered to be the norm. And sometimes that means we just have to do acts of general kindness. And I saw some in Manchester after the horrible terrorist attack there in 2017 that were just the most fantastic, spontaneous acts by individuals, 16 and 17-year-olds, walking up to people and starting conversations and exchanging pleasantries. And I stood outside an Islamic school in Didsbury, and somebody brought the head teacher of the Islamic school a bunch of flowers to show that they were in solidarity with them, recognising the pain that it was causing to decent Muslims in that
Yes,
area. And those are the things that people can do to counter the hostility that these ideological bigots are trying to create.
Exactly, and that's all I was saying, that obviously we have seen that happening in this country as well. You know, we've had flowers brought to our mosque. We had flowers brought to our mosque on Friday by our local priest, from the Anglican Church, and that sort of actions actually reassure the community. Paul, I know you're in Belgium. You've had a long journey today. Thank you for joining us. Thank you very much for taking time out. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi. Welcome back. I hope you found that interview with Paul Gianassi. I'm deeply grateful to him for taking time out from the conference that he was attending in Brussels on hate crime and sharing his thoughts with us. Before we went to the interview, which I think was quite important, because there is a lot of concern, anxiety, fear amongst the Muslim community. And as I said, Paul is the most senior officer working on hate crime in this country at this moment in time. I was talking to Maqsood, who's my guest. Obviously, these issues, confront us on a day-to-day basis, and we always focus on what the others need to do, the other side needs to do. So let me just turn that round a little bit, Maqsood. Maqsood's got, as I said in the first part of the program, enormous amount of experience working at very senior levels, strategic levels, where the senior politicians in this country, advising them on issues around equality and diversity. And obviously, his attention in the last few years has changed to issues around Islamophobia in particular. So, we say the government needs to do that, the community needs to. What do the Muslim community, in your opinion, actually does need to do now? I know you've mentioned leadership, getting better, more articulate, more intellectual people in positions of power. But what about, we've got hundreds of mosques. At the last count, there's about 2,500 mosques and madrasas in this country, or mosques in this country. We have countless numbers of community organizations, some small, some big. Some have huge assets, like, for Bradford, for example, we have the Kismet Centre, the Girling Centre, and others. They have huge assets. They put lots into the community, and they're very much focused in dealing with our community itself. Do you think it's time for them to turn themselves to looking at the more wider issue? I mean, for example, the Council of Mosque in Bradford is very active. They've already written letters to the government. They've made sort of comments around Islamophobia and the definition of Islamophobia, etc. What, in your opinion, having worked at that level, the community needs to do?
I think there's a number of areas where the community can really help. And the mosques, actually in the community centres that are led by Muslim colleagues and brothers and sisters, are doing an enormous amount of work already. They come a long way, from the 70s and the 80s. Because I think in the 70s and the 80s, our elders' vision was to have bases, and I think we have bases now through mosques and community centres across UK. The next challenge for our community, in my opinion, humble opinion, is that we need to have future leaders developed within mosques. So that starts with young people, for example. Yes, we have committee members and so forth, but the committee members need to develop themselves. And I was really pleased to see some of the mosques are now opening their doors to non-Muslims to say, listen, we're not hiding anything as a Muslim community. Please come in and observe. As long as you respect when you come to the mosques, come and observe our prayers. Come and talk to other people. Come and talk to our committee members. Come and talk to the imams. I think our imams are getting a lot better because they're bilingual. They are articulate in both languages, which is absolutely fantastic and make a difference. We need more. So we've got some good practice like Bradford, we've got some good practice in Manchester, where I come from, we've got some good practice in London. But the consistency isn't there. So we need to create that consistency all across. Second thing that we need to do is then we need to bring them together. And I was really pleased at the Muslim Council of Britain, who held their gala dinner last week in Bolton, which I attended. I think that's a great organisation which is now really coming to terms itself. It's got young chair, young committee, and articulating their views about Muslims that they represent. Of course, they don't represent everybody, but just imagine if we can have a national organisation that can help and support the mosques and the others in the community centres.
I mean, obviously, the Muslim Council of Britain, in my opinion, is one of the best organisations we've got. And I've not had many dealings with that, but the other side of that is that you've been in government, I've been in government, and the government has sort of prescribed certain organizations. And unfortunately, the Muslim Council of Britain is one of them, amongst others.
Sure.
And I think that is a huge mistake on the part of the government, and it happened with the previous government as well. So what message would you send if a minister was listening to you now? What message would you send to the minister in regards to the Muslim Council of Britain?
My message would be that the government can not only listen to people that they feel comfortable with. If they really want to learn and develop any organisation, and government is an organisation, Iqbal Bhai, an organisation and a government needs to be a listening government. It needs to look at and hear the uncomfortable voices of the Muslims who are articulating those views. If we want to develop together as a true partnership. If the government only listens to organisations that basically are funded by them and doing what the government wants to do, whether it's prevent strategy or contest strategy and etc., then actually the government won't learn. We're not learning from the mistakes. So the MCB is, from my experience of them, and I'm now going to be the new Chief Executive Officer for the British Muslim Heritage Centre, which is going to be a great institution in the sense of actually bringing communities together, inshallah. And we want to create partnerships. We want to create national partnerships with people like the MCB and the others as well in organisations. So if we can help to bring them together, then I think it's in the interest of our government in the sense of having a good partnership, or at least a positive, proactive dialogue. We may not agree with each other, and that's fine. That's a healthy situation to be in a democracy. We don't have to agree, but at least we can be respectful in the sense of really listen to each of the views and learn and progress from there. So I think there's a lack of a national organisation, 1 and 2. The more the government can support and assist and listen to national organisations and to the regional ones, the better informed they will be, in my opinion. So there's a learning lesson for both sides. There's a lot to do in the Muslim community with regards to the mosques and the others, because we need to become consistent. We need to invest in our young people, young Muslims. We've got some fantastic young people. Some of them are working here, for example. They give their time volunteering. They raise funds. They go and feed the homeless in Manchester, in Bradford, in Surrey, in Bristol. So we've seen the good work they do. But what we haven't seen is that the mainstream media, Iqbal Bhai, actually capturing that. So if the mainstream media only reports Muslims on a negativity all the time, then coming back to my idea about that socialization of non-Muslims is taking place, and it's having a massive impact.
I'm sure you would have probably read Louise Case's report that came out 2 years ago about the 5 towns. I mean, I was on the mainstream media talking about it, and some of the points that you articulated were the ones that I raised as well. But I think in terms of the government, the government at the moment has closed itself to listening to, like you say, just a few organizations. And these are, in the opinion of the majority of Muslim organizations, are yes people. They just say whatever the government wants to listen. But the real organizations who are articulating the real concerns and the fears of the Muslim community are the ones who are not being listened to. So if you have access to some of the senior members of the Parliament, what would you say to the Muslim members of the Parliament in terms of how they should influence the government to change that tact? Because I don't know whether they've made representations or not to the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary and others, about the Muslim organizations such as the MCB. And Iqbal Sakrani is an old friend of mine, a fellow Malawian that I come from. He's from Malawi as well. He asked me many years ago when we were on the Stephen Lawrence group to see whether we could change the government's mind then, and unfortunately it didn't work at that time. So what would you say to the members of Parliament? This is the time for them to come together, to work for the Muslim community rather than for their own political parties and the agendas of the political party. I've always been a critic of politicians who have not really looked at the Muslim issue, and they've only been either Labour or Conservative or Liberals, and that's the only sort of policy that they push forward. What would you say to them if they were in front of you today in the studio?
I would say to them that be brave. Come out as a Muslim. Learn from our colleagues in the LGTB. If you look at the LGTB Council and the Muslims, they are proud to be LGTB. They'll speak out in the House of Commons, they'll speak out in Parliament. My plea to my Muslim colleagues is that we need them now. We need them more now than we ever needed them. We need them to come out, be proud that they're Muslims, be proud that they're British, and fight for fairness and justice. I'm not saying they fight for Muslims for the sake of fighting for Muslims. When so much Islamophobia is taking place in our society, do they not feel the pain of the sister who gets spat at in the streets, Iqbal Bhai? Do they not feel the pain of the mother who actually gets abused on a regular basis when she's walking in the streets? Or the children at schools and
lost
others?
A baby, yes.
Absolutely. Are you with me from that side? Do they not feel the pain of the taxi drivers who gets Islamophobic abuse on a regular basis doing his job? If they don't feel that, then I'm afraid they're in the wrong job. Then not only that, I think for them in a long-term basis, what will happen is that in the past, they got the votes automatically. I think we have a second, third generation who are very, very articulate. Let's take my daughters and my son as an example, and your daughters and sons and so forth. They're not just going to vote for them because their father says vote for one political party. I think we're in a crisis if we don't get that right. And they're in a crisis if they don't get that right. Because those days have gone where we just voted for somebody because they were either a Kashmiri or they were a Punjabi or whether they were Sikh or the brotherly system. The brotherly system is breaking up because the next and third and fourth generation are now making sure that they have got 3 or 4 agendas that they want to tackle. They want to be safe like anybody else, whether they're Muslims or non-Muslims. And if those Muslim councillors or MPs are not doing that in their local areas, they're not going to get the vote. They want to have an employment. They worked very hard, the Muslim children, like the other non-Muslim children. But hard work hasn't paid off, Iqbal Bhai, for the Muslims. You can see the high unemployment amongst Pakistanis and Bangladeshis, particularly our sisters, Pakistani sisters and Bangladeshi sisters. The unemployment is absolutely shocking. Never mind the senior level, just have an employment record of Pakistani women and Bangladeshi women. It's an abysmal record.
Right.
If we aren't fighting for that injustice, as a councillor, as an MP,
let me just put this to you another way. If you take Bradford Council, for example, and I'm sure Manchester City Council, both councils have had Asian Muslim councillors for many, many, many years. Right? So they're not new, so they don't know the system. But how many of these local authorities actually have Muslim people working at senior management level? I mean, in your experience, have you come across many?
Very few. In fact, Iqbal Bhai, going back about 25 years ago when we were both active in the Home Office, we had more representation of Muslims at a senior level then, and black and Asian people, I would say, generally then, than what we have now.
So we seem to be going backwards.
We're going backwards with regards to that.
Right.
And that's why I'm talking about sleepwalking. You know, most of the Muslim community, from my experience, are not in the public services. They're either shopkeepers, they're petrol owners, are even petrol station owners, they've got their own businesses. So individually, we're doing very well.
Right.
Collectively, we are absolutely got a long way to go.
So let me just take that point. I mean, we've talked about the mosque and the leadership in the mosque and the councillors, etc. What about the Muslim community itself as an individual, as businesses, as community sort of organizations or professionals? You know, we've got Muslims in across all professional bodies. So we've got doctors, consultants, dentists, pharmacists, accountants, lawyers, etc. What do you think the community needs to do? Do we need to bring this community together? I mean, we have a Muslim professionals network, as you know, around here, but it's not very active, I've been told. What do you think that these people who are highly educated, highly intellectual, do you think they can play a role in this?
Absolutely.
I've been told we've got very limited time, but yeah.
They play a pivotal role.
Right.
That's why one of the things that the Heritage Centre, the chair Nasser Bhai and myself and others looking at setting up a Muslim solicitors network, health network, looking at issues around legal services and so forth. I think we've got some fantastic individuals who are doing very well in the businesses. Because if you look at the Muslim pound, if we ever did any research on that, we are actually regenerating areas with billions and billions of pounds. You look at Wilmslow Road, the Curry Mile in itself. Well, that hasn't been developed by the public services or the local authority. That's been developed by the Muslim community who brought them in the mainstream. Yes. With regards to that. But it never gets recognised.
Actually, a point on that is, I would like to have Salina Jan Mohammed, who's written this book called Generation M, which is about the value of the Muslim pound and recognising the Muslim pound, how important the role it plays in the economy of the UK.
Absolutely.
Right? And I think what you suggested is fantastic. I mean, may Allah give you strength and encouragement to do what you're doing. Your last message to our listeners, our viewers, what would it be? I mean, we're living through very challenging times. So in a very short time, if you want to say to our viewers, what would your message be as a person who's been at the most senior level of government advising ministers, in these challenging times, what should we be doing? I know we talked about leadership and all that
sure.
sort of stuff.
If I had one message, I would say to the Muslim, two messages, one for the Muslim community, one for the non-Muslim community. For the Muslim community, I would say that don't sleepwalk into Islamophobia.
Right.
What I mean by that is that don't wait for others to tackle Islamophobia. You be the first to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Take the first action. Don't wait for Iqbal Bai or Maqsood Ahmed or anybody else to do it. Become the leader yourself, because this is a very worthy cause that needs to happen. And if we do that, we get a collective of an army taking place. Whether you're on social media, go on social media, go on Twitter, go on LinkedIn, have a debate, have discussions, get engaged. You have to get engaged. If you're not going to get engaged, expecting somebody else to get engaged, then I'm afraid nobody else is going to do it neither. So that's one of the reasons that we are where we are. For the non-Muslim communities, my message would be is that they have nothing to fear from Muslims.
Mm-hmm.
We are loyal, we're proud to be British, we're proud to be Muslims, and our faith is very much compatible with the values or whatever they are for the British values. They have nothing to fear from us. We care about the elderly, we care about the roads, we care about the young people, wherever they come from that side of it.
Okay. Maqsood, thank you very, very much. My brothers and sisters, I hope that message resonates with every one of you. Thank you for being with us tonight. As I say every week, we run out of time very quickly. I hope you found it useful and valuable. Really thank you to Maqsood for coming all the way from Manchester. And inshallah we'll bring him back again soon, because I think people like him need to be in front of people like you on a regular basis. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May Allah bless you and be with you. Take care, look after yourself, and make du'as for all of us. May Allah be blessing you as well. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.